Hi, my name's Marlene. On the day I retired, after 40 years of giving everything, I handed my son a gift from the heart. He laughed, said it looked cheap, and right there, in front of everyone, he tossed it aside. But what they didn't know was what I'd hidden inside that box. That night wasn't just about a gift. It was about everything they'd taken for granted. The silence they mistook for weakness. The signatures they tricked me into giving. The legacy they thought they could erase. So how did we get from a quiet retirement party to tearing up a six-figure contract in front of a room full of people? And what does it take for a mother to stop being quiet and finally be seen? 40 years of spreadsheets, deadlines, late nights, and early mornings, all wrapping up into one single day. My retirement. I had imagined it differently, if I'm being honest. I thought there'd be more warmth, maybe some genuine laughter, perhaps a moment where my son looked at me like I meant something beyond free childcare and inheritance. Instead, I stood in front of the mirror that afternoon, adjusting the hem of my navy blue dress, staring at a version of myself that looked more tired than triumphant. My lipstick had always been my armor. Today, a muted plum. But even that couldn't cover the hollowness beneath my eyes. I tried to smile at my reflection. It didn't stick. The venue was beautiful, I'll give them that. Le Jardin by the lake. Jeremiah had chosen it for the view, or maybe for its Instagrammable chandeliers. The parking lot was full, the lobby echoed with the buzz of conversations and clinking glasses. A young hostess greeted me with a bright smile, then quickly scanned her clipboard. Ms. Voss? Oh, you're at table 14. This way, please. We weaved past rounds of white linen, sparkling centerpieces, and tables filled with coworkers I hadn't seen since pre-pandemic days. Then we stopped. Table 14 was in the far corner, tucked near the restroom, partially hidden by a half wall and a potted fern that had seen better days. From this angle, you couldn't even see the podium. Is this right? I asked, forcing politeness. She nodded. Yes, that's the assignment. Enjoy the evening. Someone nearby whispered, "Vendor's seat?" I heard it. I wasn't supposed to, but I did. I sat down without a word, folded my napkin in my lap, and let the sounds of the celebration wash over me like static. The main table, my son, his wife Callista, his business partner, her sister, a few friends, was 3 rows ahead, close to the stage, bright and loud. I caught Jeremiah's eye once. He smiled briefly, then turned away. Dinner came and went in polite waves. I had the chicken, it was dry. The woman next to me, Helen from accounting, asked if I'd really retired for good, or if I had plans to consult a little. I gave her a generic answer. I couldn't focus on her. My mind was already drifting toward the moment I had planned all week. The gift. After dessert, mini cheesecakes in mason jars, very trendy, Jeremiah stood to make his speech. He spoke about growth, about mentors, about how his company had scaled strategically because of discipline and timing. Callista clapped hardest. Then he gestured toward me. And of course, he said, we appreciate Mom for her years of service at her firm. It's inspiring to see people work that long. A few scattered claps. Someone cheered awkwardly. I took that as my cue. I reached under my chair and retrieved the small box. It wasn't large, but I'd wrapped it carefully. Burgundy paper, satin ribbon. Inside was a note, handwritten, and a certificate I had spent hours creating. It represented a gift, but not the kind you could measure by weight or price. I walked it up to Jeremiah, offered it with both hands. He chuckled before he even opened it. What's this? A coupon? He held it up so the light hit the paper. Mom, come on! You just retired. Couldn't spring for something real? Callista giggled. A few others joined in. Some looked away. The air turned heavier. I kept my posture straight. It's a symbolic gift, I said, voice steady. Something I thought you'd appreciate. He shrugged. Appreciate it next time with a check? He placed the box on the edge of the table like it was leftover takeout. Nobody said anything. Nobody stopped him. I returned to my table slowly, every step echoing louder in my mind than in the room. I didn't touch my drink. My water had gone warm. Someone walked by and murmured, "That was rough." But they didn't stop. I stared at the flickering candle in front of me, letting the soft glow blur into memory. When Jeremiah was 6, he cried when I missed a school recital because I was closing a quarterly report. I bought him a cookie, promised next time I'd show up early. I did. I always showed up. And now, he had called my offering cheap, in front of everyone. I didn't cry. Not because it didn't hurt, but because I had already used up all my tears in past decades when no one was watching. I scanned the room. Faces I knew, faces I didn't. Applause for the DJ. Cheers for the open bar. No one was looking at me now. I wasn't part of the highlight reel. That's when I realized this party wasn't for me. It was a performance, a curated show. I was a prop, like the glittery banners and the thank you cards with generic messages. My role had ended the moment I stepped off the payroll. I folded my napkin, tucked it neatly beside the plate, and sat back in silence. But in that silence, something shifted. A thought, a calculation, a boundary forming. The applause was still lingering when Jeremiah lifted his glass again. The room settled. Eyes returned to him like he was about to reveal something profound. I already knew I wouldn't be in it. He started with Callista. Of course. I couldn't have gotten through these past few years without my wife's unwavering support, he said, reaching for her hand like they were the lead couple in a Hallmark movie. He moved on to his father. He taught me grit. Then his business mentors, his college friends, even his golden retriever from childhood. He laughed. The room laughed with him. I sat still. The smile on my face no longer reached my eyes. He never said my name, not once. Not my mom, not Marlene, not even a vague my family. It was like I had evaporated. 40 years of showing up, paying bills, staying late at work, bailing him out of one mess after another, and I didn't even make the speech. Around me, a few people glanced over. Polite, fleeting sympathy. No one said a word. Maybe they thought I didn't notice, or maybe they thought I was used to it by now. I gave them a smile, thin and practiced, and clapped along with everyone else. The sounds of forks against dessert plates returned. Waiters refilled wine glasses. Laughter resumed. But I was somewhere else. Rewinding every year, I pushed through exhaustion to be the anchor in Jeremiah's world. It had taken him less than 10 minutes to erase all of it. I excused myself from the table and stepped outside. The air was cooler near the lake, with just enough breeze to make my arms feel bare. The patio was quiet. Most people had gone back inside to toast and take photos under the branded neon sign. That's when I noticed it. Jeremiah had left his phone on a nearby bench. It buzzed once, screen lighting up briefly. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't looking for anything, but something about that notification made my breath stop. The Burden Group. That was the name of the group chat. I stood there, not moving. Another message popped up. Callista. She's still here? I thought she'd sneak out after the coupon moment. Another reply. Someone with a last name I vaguely recognized. His cousin, perhaps. Of course not. She loves the drama. Classic martyr move. And Jeremiah's name, right below it. Well, she served her purpose. PR-wise, it plays well. Let's just get through tonight. I didn't open more. I didn't need to. The screen dimmed again, but the word stayed with me. Burden. A burden. That's what I was to them. Not a mother. Not a woman who skipped vacations, who worked 2 jobs when Jeremiah was a baby, who drove him to speech therapy 3 times a week after school when no one else had the patience. Just a burden. I walked slowly back inside, heart pounding, but face calm. No one noticed I had stepped away. That stung too. I returned to my seat. Jeremiah was posing for photos now, Callista at his side like she belonged to a lifestyle ad. My water glass was where I left it, untouched. I lifted it, held it midair for a second, and set it back down. That was when I felt it. The click. The one inside. Not rage, not tears, just clarity. A small, firm voice in my chest that whispered, "You can't forget this. You won't let it slide." The rest of the night unfolded like I wasn't even there. People danced. Jokes flew across the room. I sat quietly, surrounded by noise that somehow didn't reach me. What hurt the most wasn't what they said. It was what they didn't. The morning light filtered in through the kitchen blinds, casting familiar lines across the countertop. I stood at the sink, hands motionless on the faucet, trying to shake off the echo of last night's laughter, the kind that excluded you even when you were in the room. The clink of silverware, the hollow claps, the speech that skipped right over me like I was a skipped song on a playlist. It stayed with me, thick like fog. The kettle hissed softly. I poured water into my favorite mug, the one with a fading sunflower decal, and dropped in a chamomile bag. The silence of the house, once comforting, now felt like a verdict. I walked to the window, watching cardinals dart between tree branches. I used to tell Ronald they were his mother's way of visiting us. He believed that, or at least let me believe he did. I had just settled into my chair with the tea when I heard the knock. 3 sharp raps, rushed. It was Jeremiah, holding my grandson by the wrist like he was half late and half annoyed. "Hey, Mom," he said, stepping in without waiting. "We're heading to a meet and greet for Callista's brand deal. Can you watch Liam for a few hours?" I opened my mouth to respond, but Liam was already tossing his backpack onto my sofa. "Behave with Grandma," Jeremiah said, barely looking at either of us. Liam blinked up at me, clutching his tablet. "Grandma?" he asked plainly. "How come you don't work? Dad says you just eat and sleep now." The words didn't come with malice. They came with innocence, the kind that repeats what it hears at dinner tables, never questioning if it's cruel. I didn't correct him. I just nodded, brushing his hair from his forehead. "That's what they say, huh?" He shrugged, already lost in his screen. Jeremiah was out the door before I could offer him coffee or confrontation. The door clicked behind him with the same finality as a chapter ending. Later that afternoon, I opened the drawer in my bedroom where Ronald's old watch used to rest. It was gold-toned, simple, with a leather band cracked from years of wear. He wore it to our wedding, to Liam's baptism, to every tax season we barely survived. I planned to wear it, just for a few hours, just to feel something steady. But it was gone. I searched the drawer again, then the bathroom shelf, then my jewelry box. Nothing. That night, over a bland dinner Callista had ordered through an app, I asked gently, "Has anyone seen your father's watch? The one he wore almost every day?" She didn't look up from her salad. "Oh, that? I sold it last week. It looked so dated. No one wears those anymore. I figured you wouldn't mind." I stared at her, the silence between us stretching like wire. "You sold Ronald's watch?" She shrugged. "It was just sitting there. Like the years I spent holding this family together. I didn't yell. I didn't slam a fist on the table or storm out of the room like a woman in a soap opera. I simply stood, walked back to the study, and closed the door behind me. Inside, I opened the cedar box that still smelled like his cologne. Letters, tax receipts, photos yellowing at the edges, all the scraps of a life shared, and slowly being erased. I sat in his chair and rested my hands in my lap. My palms felt empty in a way they hadn't before. They weren't just taking things. They were rewriting who I was. Later, when Liam was asleep and the house had dimmed again, I opened my journal. I didn't write much, just one line. "They've begun taking things that don't belong to them. I need to remember who I am." It started with a knock. Not the urgent kind, just 3 soft taps on the front door, the kind that says, "I'm not asking, I'm here." I opened it to find Jeremiah standing there, phone in one hand, Liam half asleep on his shoulder. "Hey, Mom. Thought we'd drop him off a little early today. Callista's got a shoot, and I've got a pitch meeting. You know how it is." He didn't pause long enough for me to respond. Liam stumbled in, clutching a juice pouch and his stuffed dinosaur. My eyes caught the time on the wall clock. 7:18 a.m. No. Good morning? No. Is this okay? Just an assumption that because I had retired into servitude. Jeremiah kissed the top of Liam's head and turned to go. Now that you're free, you can help more, right? He added, tossing the words over his shoulder like they were casual and kind. I gave a slow nod. Not agreement, just recognition that resistance would only delay the inevitable. By 9:00, Callista had texted a 4-paragraph list. Lunch preferences, screen time limits, nap time windows, and please make sure he doesn't touch anything dusty. He has mild allergies. I read the last line twice, looking around my clean living room, then out at the garden I kept with pride. Liam curled up on the couch, watching cartoons. I made him pancakes. He only ate 2 bites. By noon, my back ached from bending, lifting, moving in a rhythm I hadn't danced in years. I didn't complain, not out loud, but each step felt heavier than it used to. At 3:30, I tried to sit for 10 minutes with a cup of tea. The phone buzzed again. Don't forget the post-nap stretching. We do it every day. Helps his posture, Callista had added. I stared at the screen. There was no thank you, no we appreciate you, just more directions, more assumption. Liam fell asleep around 4 his little legs sprawled over the throw blanket I crocheted last fall. I sat at the edge of the couch and watched him breathe. He looked peaceful, unaware of the web he was growing up in. When Jeremiah returned at 6:15, he didn't knock. He walked in, called Liam's name like it was just another Tuesday. I handed him the backpack, said nothing. He smiled vaguely. Oh, he said, reaching into his coat pocket. Callista got you something. He handed me a card, pale green, embossed. I opened it slowly. Inside, a pre-printed message read, "Thank you for your service and dedication." Below that, in silver ink, it said, "The Peter family." That's it. Not Mom, not Marlene. Just a brand name, like I was an employee they no longer wanted to pay. I sat with the card in my lap long after they left. The tea had gone cold on the counter. I didn't move. The words stared back at me with the same emptiness I'd felt growing for months. No, years. I placed the card on the table, right beside the coaster Ronald used to tease me for polishing too often. I looked around at the walls, the family photos, the awards, the school reports I once framed. I thought of every school pickup in the rain, every midnight fever, every rent check I paid when Jeremiah was between jobs. Not one of those moments had come with a thank you card. And now, when I'd given everything they asked for without hesitation, all I was worth was a signature from a family that wasn't mine. I didn't cry. Instead, I stood, walked to the sink, washed the tea mug, dried it, placed it back on the rack. My hands moved with mechanical ease, but inside me, a wire pulled tighter. Later that evening, I opened my journal. I didn't write much, just one line. Helping is love, but being used is something else. I need to define the line. It was Thursday when the email came in. Subject line: full video coverage of retirement gala, Le Jardin. Nadine had forwarded it with a short message. Thought you might want this. I clicked without thinking, expecting the familiar awkwardness of seeing myself on camera, hearing my voice slightly off. The video began with drone footage of the lake, glittering under the setting sun. The intro rolled with music that felt more like a commercial for a tech startup than a celebration of 4 decades in finance. Jeremiah's voice came in first, then Callista's. There were interviews, filtered photos, even slow-motion shots of the toasts. But my clip wasn't there. I kept watching, waiting for the moment. The one I had worked on for days. A 2-minute tribute, just me and the truth. Grainy photos from the 1980s, me in my blue scrubs, pushing Jeremiah in a stroller to the night shift. Birthday cakes made from boxed mix and frosting scraped together with grocery coupons. The file had been labeled clearly. Mom's message, play during toast. It never showed. Instead, they ran a slideshow set to an upbeat pop song with Callista's voiceover. This event honors resilience, vision, and the strength of our future. Strength of our future. I shut the laptop lid slowly, pressing it closed with more force than I meant to. For a moment, I sat there staring at nothing. That night, as I refilled the ice trays, I remembered something Jeremiah had said at the venue. I had overheard him whispering near the stage before the event began. "She sent over some sob story video," he muttered to Callista. "I pulled it. We don't need to start the night with her struggles. It's not that kind of party." Callista had laughed. "Good call. It's about celebrating, not dragging everyone through trauma." Trauma. That's what they called my life, my work, my devotion. I returned to the study and opened the filing cabinet. It was time to make sense of something else that had nagged at me since the party, the folder Jeremiah had handed me 2 weeks ago, labeled Bank Compliance Updates. He'd caught me just as I was rushing out to a dental appointment. "Just sign this when you get a chance, Mom. It's for the mortgage bank. New verification they need for your name on the account." I didn't even question it. I had trusted him. Now I opened the folder and read every line. It wasn't just bank paperwork. It was a quitclaim deed, a document to transfer the title of my house, into joint ownership with Jeremiah. Legal language filled the page: survivorship rights, implied consent, future sale authority. My hand trembled. The page had my signature, my real one. I had signed this. I hadn't understood. I grabbed my phone and called Nadine. She picked up on the third ring. "I need your eyes on a document," I said, calm but clipped. She met me the next morning, her glasses slipping slightly as she reviewed the folder at her dining room table. Her brow furrowed deeper with each page. "This isn't a compliance form," she said. "This gives him power to sell your property without needing your approval. It's a preparatory move. He's positioning you out of ownership." We spent the next hour drafting a freeze order, an affidavit to prevent any further changes to my deed without direct consent. Nadine handled it swiftly, professionally, but when she looked up at me, her voice softened. "They're starting to treat you like an asset, not a person." That night, I didn't cook. I didn't even eat. I sat in front of the computer and rewatched the gala video, watched them all laugh, all pose, watched them erase me with confidence. I opened the folder where my video still lived, unplayed. I clicked it, let it play. There I was, in black and white, holding Jeremiah as a toddler. Behind me was our old apartment, a heater propped up with bricks. I'd done voiceover myself, simple words. Just truth. How I worked 3 jobs. How I stayed. How I kept the lights on. When the video ended, I sat back in the dark and whispered aloud to no one, "If I'm not worthy of your memory, then you're not worthy of my future." Jeremiah showed up mid-morning, holding a manila envelope and that usual easy grin he wore when he needed something. "Just a quick thing, Mom," he said, letting himself into the kitchen like it was still his house. "Estate stuff. You know, paperwork the bank needs now that you're retired. Super basic. Just sign where I highlighted." He slid the folder across the counter and pulled out a pen like a magician about to perform a harmless trick. I looked at the papers, the neon yellow flags guiding the pen toward my name. "Mind if I hold on to it for a day or two?" I asked, carefully neutral. Jeremiah blinked. "I mean, sure, it's nothing urgent. Just easier to handle it now." "I'd still like to read it through. My lawyer might want to glance at it too." He hesitated for a breath, then laughed a little. "Always thorough, huh?" He didn't press further, but I noticed the way his smile dimmed before he left. I waited until he was gone before calling Nadine. We met at her office that afternoon. She didn't say much as she flipped through the pages, just murmured here and there, eyes tightening. When she finally looked up, her face was drawn in that careful way only lawyers and widows can manage. This isn't just estate paperwork, Marlene. It's a durable power of attorney. It gives Jeremiah full control over your assets, bank accounts, real estate. He could sell your house, and there wouldn't be a thing you could do after this is signed. I felt the blood drain from my fingertips. But it says, standard verification, I whispered. Nadine tapped the fine print. That's the bait. Buried 3 pages deep, it overrides your current setup and names him sole executor. No third-party review required. She pulled out another file. And this? I dug into some property filings you asked me to watch last month. Your name's been used as a co-signer on a business loan he took out 4 months ago. No disclosure, no consent. She handed me a copy. There was my signature again, but I had never seen this paper in my life. The memory came in fast. Him rushing in one Saturday, waving a document that just needed initials so the mortgage company wouldn't delay processing. I'd been prepping groceries for Liam's birthday party. I had trusted him. Nadine reached across the table and gently squeezed my wrist. You're not the first mother this has happened to, she said, but if we move now, you don't have to be the next headline. By the end of that week, we had filed a freeze order on all property adjustments and sent cease and desist letters to the lending bank and Jeremiah's business partner. Nadine helped me reassign legal protections and revoke any previously granted access. Her work was meticulous. My letter to Jeremiah was not. I kept it brief. This is the last document I will ever review with your name on it, unless it's a public apology. He called that night. Once. I answered. You didn't have to make this messy, he said. You know how complicated estate planning can get. It's only complicated when someone's hiding something, I replied. And it's not about the money, Jeremiah. It's about dignity, mine. Silence stretched over the line. I hung up before he finished. That evening, I pulled every file from my home cabinet, every folder labeled with anything he'd handed me over the years. I laid them all on the dining table. One by one, I read through them again. For each form, I placed a red sticker on the top corner if it had been initiated by Jeremiah. It was a long night. The stack grew taller than I remembered. And red was everywhere. In the morning, I filed copies with Nadine, organized everything into labeled binders, and locked them in a fireproof safe. The kind Ronald used to joke was overkill for a retired accountant. Before I went to bed, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. I didn't see a victim. I saw someone who had been underestimated for far too long. I whispered to myself, steady and low. They thought I was defenseless, but they forgot who taught them to read. The envelope was cream-colored with gold edging, exactly the kind Callista would pick. Inside was a thick invitation printed on heavy cardstock. An intimate evening of gratitude and reconnection. At the bottom, in smaller text, hosted by Jeremiah and Callista Rayner. No mention of me, no title, just an address and a dress code. Business formal. I laughed under my breath. It wasn't a reconciliation. It was a PR stunt. Nadine and I sat at her kitchen table 2 nights before the event. She read the invitation twice. They're not making peace, she said flatly. They're making content. Go in with your own script this time, Marlene. And I did. The private club downtown was newer than I expected. Clean lines, brushed steel, glass staircases. The kind of place where every corner smelled like rosemary oil and money. I arrived early, wearing a dark navy dress with sleeves that made me feel tall. I carried a small velvet box in my purse. Jeremiah spotted me from across the room. "Mom, you made it," he said, with a grin wide enough to show his molars. Callista swooped in behind him, with that smooth voice she uses for brand deals. "So good to see you. Tonight's going to be special." I nodded, scanning the room. Camera crew in the back, a videographer. Someone had even set up a ring light. They weren't hosting a dinner, they were filming a campaign. The evening dragged on. Wine was poured. Mini quiches were passed around. Someone said grace over a microphone. Then Jeremiah tapped his glass and stood near the head table. "Before dessert," he began, I'd like to say a few words. His speech was short, mostly fluff about gratitude and strong family roots. Then he glanced at me with a grin. And as many of you know, my mom gave me a very memorable retirement gift not long ago. The room chuckled. But tonight, he continued, we honor second chances, rebuilding, forgiveness. That's when I stood up. I walked forward slowly, heels quiet against the marble floor, and placed a small box on the table in front of him. Since you brought it up, I said, my voice steady, I thought I'd share what was actually inside that box. Callista stopped sipping her champagne. I opened it. Inside was an original signed contract, transferring 4% equity in a medical software company I had quietly invested in over a decade ago. At its last valuation, that share was worth $257,000. There were audible gasps. I didn't look at them. I took the contract, held it up between my fingers, and slowly tore it in half, then in quarters. Someone in the back lifted a phone. I saw the light from a recording app flash on. That, I said, letting the pieces drop into the dessert plate, was once for you, because I believed in you, because I thought you would carry forward the good in our family. I turned toward the guests. But when you call your own mother a burden, when you delete her from her own story and think she'll keep paying to be mistreated, that's not family. That's performance. A silence fell over the room, thick enough to chew. Callista's mouth was slightly open. Jeremiah had gone pale. I reached into my purse again and placed a sealed envelope in front of him. In case you're still confused, this is legal documentation. Effective immediately, both of you are removed from all trusts and inheritances under my name. I looked him in the eye. You chose public image over private respect. I'm simply following your lead. I turned then, slowly, and walked away. I didn't rush. I didn't flinch. Heels clicking like a metronome across marble. Napkins rustled. A fork clattered somewhere to the right, but no one said a word. At the entrance, the hostess who had greeted me hours ago smiled nervously. Leaving already, ma'am? I nodded. Yes. The best part already happened. And I stepped into the night, cool and clear. The door clicked shut behind me, muffling the murmurs inside, like someone had pressed mute on a television. I could still hear the echoes of forks halting mid-bite, the collective silence of people unsure whether to clap, gasp, or pretend none of it had happened. I didn't look back. As I walked down the long hallway toward the lobby, heels tapping against polished tile, a staff member from the club appeared beside me. He wore a fitted vest, name tag barely clinging to the edge. Ms. Voss? He asked gently. I just wanted to say, I've never seen a room go that quiet. Ever. I gave a nod, half smile at most. He paused. You know, we didn't even know they were your family. The only reason this event got booked on such short notice was because of your stake. They said it was handled, but your name is on the silent partnership. You're the reason they got the venue at all. I stopped walking, not out of shock, but to take that in. The irony, the sheer perfection of it. Thank you, I said simply. I wondered if they even remembered. They didn't, he said. But we did. By the time I stepped outside, the night air had shifted. It wasn't cold, just still, like the pause after a storm when everything feels suspended. Back inside, Nadine was still there. I didn't have to ask her to stay. I knew she would. As Jeremiah stood near the bar, trying to salvage what remained of his event, Nadine stepped up to the microphone they'd left on the dessert table. The sound system hadn't been turned off. That was their mistake. Before this night winds down, she said evenly, there's something I think you all should know. The room stilled again. People turned, phones still in hand, some already filming again. You all just witnessed a mother reclaim her voice, Nadine continued. What you didn't see, because she never boasted about it, was what she gave up for that man to be standing here. She pointed toward Jeremiah. Decades ago, when he lost his scholarship, when he got expelled and came home with nothing but excuses and shame, Marlene Voss didn't walk away. She sold her wedding ring, her bangles, her mother's gold necklace, every piece of jewelry she had left from her family's past, not to survive, but to send him back to school, quietly, without humiliating him, without telling anyone. Murmurs rippled through the room like a fast current. She kept his dignity intact, and tonight he erased hers. Jeremiah tried to speak, but fumbled, words catching in his throat. Someone near the back of the room called out, "That's shameful." Another voice added, "You never said any of that." Callista had frozen halfway through a sip of champagne, glass still poised mid-air, like she didn't know whether to drink or disappear. I stood outside the doorway, unseen but hearing every word, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a ghost haunting my own life. I felt solid, present, accounted for. The power in that room had shifted, not because of the money, not even because of the contract I'd torn, because truth. Dripping Springs was quieter than I remembered. Not in a lonely way, just softer, like the world finally stopped shouting at me. The mornings smelled of cedar and freshly baked bread from the corner bakery. I made a ritual of walking early, letting the sunlight stretch over my shoulders like a warm hand. My new apartment was small, but sunlight poured in through every window. I painted the walls myself, a gentle sage green, and planted rosemary and lavender on the patio. It smelled like peace. For the first time in decades, my calendar wasn't filled with obligations I never agreed to. No one dropped off a child unannounced. No one handed me a pen with a page already highlighted. They never said sorry. But I stopped needing it. Jeremiah sent an email first, 2 paragraphs about miscommunication and hoping to reconnect as a family. He wanted to talk as adults. I read it 3 times before typing a single sentence in reply. "You knew what mattered, and you chose otherwise." Then I blocked his email. Not out of anger, out of clarity. When Callista posted a vague quote on her social media, "Forgiveness isn't for them, it's for you," I didn't flinch. I didn't respond. Let them find audience elsewhere. My piece didn't need applause. Instead, I focused on legacy. Not in the traditional sense, but something more useful. Nadine helped me finalize the paperwork for a charitable trust. We named it the Voss Fund for Dignity and Independence. It would offer small grants to single mothers finishing nursing school, women like I once was, standing in checkout lines doing math in my head between diapers and textbooks. The first recipient was a 26-year-old woman named Betrayal. She wrote me a letter, handwritten, shaky, signed with love. When we met over lunch, she cried into her lemonade, saying she could now afford to graduate without working 2 jobs. I didn't cry. I just held her hand and said, "Make it count, for you, not for anyone else." At the grocery store a week later, I bumped into Marianne, an old coworker from the finance department. "We miss your calm," she said, placing a bag of apples into her cart. I smiled and nodded. "I brought that calm home with me." We didn't speak much after that. She understood. We both did. There were still echoes, of course. Some moments lingered longer than they should have, like finding one of Ronald's old cufflinks at the bottom of a drawer, or seeing a mother help her son tie a tie on a church morning. But they didn't bruise me the way they used to. They simply reminded me I had lived, that I had loved fiercely, and lost accordingly. One evening, I sat on my patio with a glass of tea and my journal. The final page had waited patiently. I wrote only one sentence. "You can't force people to see you, but you can decide who you'll never let blind you again." Then I closed the book. Not because the story was over, but because I had finally started writing it for myself. In the end, I learned that silence can be powerful, but only when you choose it, not when it's forced upon you. For years, I gave everything I had to people who believed I owed it to them. But love without respect is not love, it's convenience. And convenience has an expiration date. So if you're watching this and you've ever felt invisible in your own home, overlooked by the very people you raised or stood by, know this: you are not alone, and you are not powerless. You don't need permission to reclaim your worth. Sometimes the loudest victory is simply choosing yourself. Now I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever felt like Marlene? What would you have done differently? If this story touched you, leave a 1 in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. And if it didn't resonate, I'd still love to know why. Your voice matters too. If this video found its way to your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next story. Let's keep this conversation going. You never know who might need to hear what you have to say.